Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Airborne Empire. So for those not across it, I do overviews on this channel. It's where I have a look at the first 2 hours of a game. It's the Steam refund window. Steam reckons you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time, and I broadly would agree, and as a rule say 20 hours in, you're probably not going to change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short, punchy video, keep it around 10 minutes, give you the broad strokes info, and you can make up your mind on your own. Okay, so this is an interesting one. How do I start this without sounding a bit doom and gloomy? Look, I'll just lead open and honest. I'm a little bit disappointed with what's going on here. Now, granted, it's early access, but my background, before you lose your mind and, abuse me in the comments and thumbs down, understand that this is a sequel to Airborne Kingdom, which I picked up and gave a go like last week or 2 weeks ago. And I was kind of smitten with that. I really enjoyed it. It's very innovative and original, and I still highly recommend it. Now, that's not to say I don't recommend this, because disappointment comes in different flavors and it's born from different things. So this isn't me yelling and screaming and saying that this is some burning hot mess. It's really not, but I feel like they haven't changed a whole lot, which, there's a fair argument in the sequel space to go with what you know and stick close. But I find that it's almost a little bit derivative of the original, and what they have changed has been more akin to taking your toys off your audience and power scaling back as opposed to adding more. Now look, in the longer tail there might be more here, but at least in the comparative, short term that I've had a look at it, 90% of this game is it feels almost like just a remake or a reimagining. Funnily enough, like an Army of Dead scenario or something. Maybe we've got a bit more money and a bit more developmental know-how and we're just remaking the game again. Because aspects of that is exactly what's going on here. They haven't changed the art style so much, but things like the world overview that you can see, it looks a lot prettier. There's some interesting things going on with like whales going through the ocean. That's very cool, I suppose, but I kind of feel like one of the cool things about the first game was that unique less is more kind of art style, actually. I was quite taken with the way that they went for sort of a artistically realized cartographic open world. Now, this is going to come down to individual taste, but they've obviously put a lot of effort into reimagining, let's say, their art style. It still has a lot of that foundations. There's a low poly aspect to the buildings, etc. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the sales pitch on this is that it maybe looks prettier and better, but personally, as a newfound fan of the game, I kind of found the first game prettier. Mechanically, it's almost identical, or at least overarching-wise. You've inexplicably got this flying ship and you're going around, and it must be some time jump in the future from the second game, but it feels like there's been no change, no impact, other than there are kind of sky pirates flying around. That's probably the biggest change of all, and I kind of feel like that informs a lot of the throttling changes that they've decided to implement on the back of it. Almost like a balancing mechanic now that they've got an adversarial component to it. But before I lose the thread, you essentially build up your little platform base, you move around the open world, interact with cities, settlements, that sort of thing. They'll give you little missions, they'll give you dudes that you can recruit, you can trade, buy research blueprints, almost one-to-one identical from the first game, except they've created some sort of Simlish and this aviary attorney style characterization, which, and this is definitely personal taste. I don't particularly love it. I kind of enjoyed the less is more mystery of the first game. There was almost a dare I say, and the way I interpret it, a kind of grim nature to the setting, and putting these cutesy little bird characters in there changes it a bit for me, at least. But the actual real travesty is the building mechanics were so freeform, and they kind of rewarded you for poking and prodding and experimenting. You could essentially free move things in the first game. Well, I shouldn't say free. You could just move a building. You'd have to pay a nominal price, but you could Tetris around, and that was part of the fun, building out these ramshackle monstrosities and moving things around. Now, unless this is some gated technology that they've pushed way back, that's not what you can do straight out of the gate here. In fact, you're actually very limited in multiple ways. So moving things around is not really something you can do. You just have to destroy that. Things like the propulsion systems seem to have a pretty arbitrary limitation. You can only put them on the front of the boat. I don't think it was like that in the first game. Could be wrong, though. Lift is incredibly throttled as well. Now, I'm assuming a little bit of required reading. You can go back and watch my first video. But there's a lift mechanic, and again, all these mechanics are kind of one-to-one carried over. So like I said, 90% of the original game is here, but now they've put all these constraints on it that kind of take a bit of the fun, a lot of the fun, out of what I loved about it in the first iteration. But lift is this idea that there is X tiles you're allowed to build onto your platform, right? Call it 40 or something like that. And in the first game, you would start out with this fan building technology, whatever you want to call it. You can build, and it would interfere with the tilt mechanics. Again, these are all exactly the same. But that fan was kind of larger and gave you more build capacity, let's say. I only probably had to build 1 or 2 of them in the time I spent with the first game. Now I think I'm up to my 4th fan already in the early going of Airborne Empire. It just feels much more constrained. It doesn't really want to let me off the leash. And again, when you package in the fact that it's throttling my ability by forcing me to build more fans and having to rebuild, destroy, all that sort of stuff and move things around. Look, as a cost perspective, maybe it's exactly the same. It's hard to really tell. I haven't done a one-to-one comparison, but it makes it more fiddly and honestly comes away a little less fun. I sound like I'm going hard on this game. I'm not trying to. I think in a vacuum, if this was your first Airborne game, you probably quite love it, right? Dare I say, be taken by it because you aren't spoilt from the first game. And yes, this is early access, which more and more I dislike greatly because you end up with situations like this where they take the formula and kind of strip it back because it's early development and then they're going to add stuff onto it. And, you know, this is probably one of the more unusual arguments against engaging with early access because you might come away a bit disappointed, not strictly because the game's bad, but because it's not exactly a huge change from what was in the first one. So look, jump forward a couple of years, who knows? This might be a radically different game when it hits 1.0, if it hits 1.0. But currently, honestly, my true advice would be check out the first game. Like I said, I played it last week. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Highly recommend it. Go back, check that out. Wishlist this and keep an eye on it from afar. At the moment, especially if you did go and play the first game, you consume it, you hoover it up, you love it, and you jump on this, you're going to disappoint yourself. It might turn into something else different down the road, but what little they have changed is mostly aesthetic and mostly kind of throttling freeform build mechanics that made the original so appealing to at least me. But look, what would I know? I'm just some idiot that plays video games. I hope this is understood that I'm not trying to bash on this game. I'm not necessarily saying it's bad or anything like that. But again, after the promise of the first game and coming off of it fresh, I suppose I expected more. So, like I said, while I'm a little bit disappointed personally, this gets into subjective disappointment. It's not like as a hard statement, a bad game or anything like that. I just feel like they've kind of pulled their punches, whether intentional or otherwise. Perhaps their whole objective is to kind of 1.5 remake the original with a better budget and a bit more development experience. If that's the case, then I suppose this is a success. That's what they're doing. And maybe they have more plans for it in the longer tail, the longer term, call it end game, whatever. I've seen screenshots and all that where it looks like your thing can get quite large, but I don't want to go too circular. I've covered my concerns with it. Maybe we'll check in on it further down the track in development. But for now, I would tentatively be very careful jumping on this in its current early access state. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.